We have
a quorum. This is the appointed time. Let's start the meeting. First of all, Mr. Andrew WAN, who is not here. On the 19th of May, Mr. WAN sent a letter to the chairman asking to join this Bills Committee out of time. Under Rule 23(c), if there is an application to join out of time for reasons other than being indisposed during the joining period, then the decision will have to be made by the Bills Committee, and the application will only be accepted when it's fully justified. So I ask members, do you accept Mr. WAN's application? We do? Okay, we do. Now part 2. Meeting with the administration. Let's invite them to come in to join us. Before the officials come in to join us, let me give you some information about timetable. If we can complete the scrutiny of this bill today, then we would be able to submit a report to this House Committee on the 16th of June. For resumption of second reading in the Council on the 26th of June, so time's quite tight. In the last meeting, a member noted that the administration will allow an operator to run on a trial basis 3 lines to public hospitals using a vehicle of the length of wheelbase longer than the prescribed length. So the member asked whether in other areas it will be implemented. So this is in relation to CB bracket 41090. Could you maybe speak up? Last time we were talking about a low platform bus and 3 routes being run on a trial basis. Mr. Tam would like to know whether there are some obstacles in other areas restricting the use of buses longer than 7 meters in their wheelbase. A written request was made to ask us for a report. In short, there are some sections covered by certain routes. If you use a vehicle that is longer than 7 meters, it will not be suitable. And in the annex, you will find these sections, 40 of them. And as to slopes, yes, you are allowed to use a vehicle of a length exceeding the statutory limit. Well, second item is in relation to some CSAs, that is to increase the seating capacity from 16 to 20. I will ask first the legal advisor to give us his views first before we hear from the administration. Thank you. Mr. Edward Lau, on the last occasion, ask for the seating capacity to increase from to further increase the seating capacity from 19 to 20. Just like last time I have when I explained, if we look at the long title and the explanatory memorandum, it states very clearly and specifically that the purpose of the bill is not just to increase seating capacity, is to increase the seating capacity to 19. Since it's specifically stated, I don't see that the number 19 is for an indicative purpose or is something along the lines of guidance. So my view is the same as last time. Whether there is an proposed increase or reduction, it will go beyond the scope of this bill. So any change to this number may breach Rule 57 bracket 4A of the Rules of Procedure. But whether it is actually really out of scope is for the President to consider after taking into account the Blue Bill, the explanatory memorandum, and also explanation from the administration. Perhaps I'll ask the legal advisor to answer 2 more questions because there were 3 questions asked. First, whether it can be more than 16 seats. 2, whether they can all be changed to a low floor for wheelchair, and whether all seat belts should be fitted with a sensor, just like in a private car, as suggested by Mr. Michael Tian. Dr. Fernando Cheung's proposal, whether we can specify it in the bill that some of the increased seats are for wheelchair users. Well, looking at the bill, this is to increase the seating capacity of light buses from 16 to 19 without specifying what type of passengers they are. So if members ask to have some of the seats specified as wheelchair friendly, I don't see any problem with that because there is nothing otherwise stated. But what we have to consider is that whether existing light buses can be fitted with wheelchair-friendly seats while keeping to the 19 seats seating capacity. Because if that can't be done, then the original intent of the bill will not be achieved.
And if through the bill we change the definition of public minibus to have the maximum capacity to 19 seats, and that and then they will need to provide for wheelchair users, then we are not able to provide as many seats. And so in accordance with 57 bracket 4B, then we would not be able to comply with that. So that is something that members need to note. And if we want to try the proposal suggested by Dr. Fernando Cheung, then there will need to be a structural change in the public minibuses. Right now, the length, height, width, and the door width is under 37A of the road traffic bill. Therefore, Dr. Fernando Chung would need to first amend Cap 374, and will need to look into whether other parameters besides the length needs to be amended. The bill only aims to increase the number of seats, and there is nothing in the bill that includes the structure of the minibuses or other structural change. Therefore, for any changes related to 37A and to the structural change of the vehicle, that would be out of the bill and might violate the scope of the rules of procedure under 57(4)(a). The seat belt sensor suggested by Mr. Tian is similar as well, because you would need to make amendments to 37A to include clauses that bus drivers must install such a safety sensor. But from what I see right now, no structural changes are to be made at this point, and there's no intention to make amendments in relation to 37A other than the number of seats. Therefore, my view is that both the amendments proposed by Dr. Chung and Mr. Tin would be out of scope. Ultimately, is it really out of scope and you cannot increase the number of seats from 19 to 20, then the decision rests with the president of LegCo. Oh, thank you. So I'd like to invite the administration to respond to these views. Thank you, legal advisor. Well, we're talking about the policies here. Perhaps I could briefly tell you about the policy to be used as a basis for discussion. We have explained in detail that increasing the number of seats to 19 would be more appropriate because, first of all, it would be able to better satisfy the demand of the passengers, because adding 3 seats would be most effective. And we do not want to be too aggressive. We want to be on the safe side. We've waited for 30 years to make this transition. We're now right in front of the goal. Should we make the cake or not? We think that we should stay at the number 19. We agree with the view on wheelchair users. Therefore, we would like to first try out trial runs for 3 hospital routes. Dr. Fernando Chung asked whether we are actually delaying the transition. But as I said, we need to conduct trial runs to learn from the experience before we come to a decision on how to make minibuses access free. In relation to seat belts, we are in support of installing seat belts and to make it mandatory for passengers to fasten their seat belts. For all of the new buses have seatbelts installed. Only 30% of the old buses do not provide seatbelts. I'm sure this would give rise to a new wave of new bus purchases, because it is natural to buy new vehicles after the life cycle is over. It just depends on how long it takes before all the buses install seatbelts. I mentioned the experience with taxis at the last meeting. When all vehicles provide seatbelts, passengers would not find it so confusing and think that seatbelts are not mandatory. I remember the chairman mentioned last time that law enforcement would also encourage people to use seatbelts. So we believe that at this moment we would not need to install the safety seatbelt sensor. Right now, we can first try to increase the number of seats and not try to bind both amendments together. We can always come back to the panel to suggest a change in the seatbelt sensor later. And our views are the same as that of the legal advisor. All right. So both sides believe that it is not appropriate to do it at this moment. But well, if you insist, then we can try to push ahead. But of course, the decision lies with the president. Well, before I open the floor for questions, I would like to first like all of you to take note that about 100 vehicles would need to change to new buses this time due to environmental regulations. First, Mr. Lau Kwok-fan. Thank you, Chairman. Both legal advisors have given their views, and I'm disappointed with the answer. I'm very disappointed because at this moment, I think 20 seats would be more appropriate and more ideal. Well, in the long title of the bill, you state very clearly that it would be a 19-seat bus. And so I won't be able to make any amendments. You've already made your decision. So whatever we say wouldn't change anything. Well, you said you would consider our views. But what I see right now is that if I bring this to the president would also listen to the views of the legal advisor. Well, I could try to make an amendment, but I'm sure that would be to no avail. And if I try to make any changes right now, then it would affect 100 vehicles not being able to get the subsidy this year. So should I try to fight for this or take a step back? So I'd like to ask the administration if you would commit that even if I'm not able to make amendments today, you'll be able to put it in black and white, or at least put it on record, that you would come back for a review in 1 year. and review whether the seats should be increased to 20. I want a commitment from you before I decide on my way forward. Deputy Secretary. Thank you for your views. It's very clear. Well, we do not want to delay any longer, as we are right at the moment before we kick in the goal. Well, there is room for change, but we need to look into whether to look at the mechanism of whether the minibus can satisfy the demands of passengers. We are not only increasing the number of seats, we also increase the number of vehicles. And right now there is a maximum number of public buses at the 4,350. And that would be effective for another 5 years. 5 years later, we would need to discuss whether this number is sufficient. Well, how many passengers could a minibus take? That would be the most important question. The industry is used to a timetable. If you want to bring this out for discussion earlier, I don't see why that's impossible. But as the chairman said right at the beginning, the administration would like to resume second reading after this is passed, and if everything goes smooth, it would be passed on the same day of the second reading, and the industry would adopt trial runs before they decide whether to buy new vehicles. I suggest that you could also pay attention to the effect, and then when you believe that the time is appropriate, you could bring this up to the administration again. I don't think we should set it right now to review it in 1 year. We can be flexible. We don't have to set it at 1 year. So I suggest that you also consider the views of the industry. If you find that 19 seats are still not sufficient, then you can bring this up and we can carry out a discussion again. But right now, we do not know the responses from the public. I don't think we should set the date to have it reviewed within 1 year.
I heard from the permanent secretary that they are willing to review it, but perhaps 1 year is too soon. I'm willing to talk. Well, the last time there was a change in seating capacity was 30 years. You said there was no need for a timetable. That means we will have to wait for another 30 years. I have been following what happened about the seating capacity. Members and officials think that increasing seating capacity is more effective than increasing the number of vehicles. That's when we talked about extending the franchise for 5 years. So the most effective way is to increase seating capacity instead of the number of vehicles. Well, if we both are willing to concede, give me a date about when you will conduct a review. Otherwise, it will be like last time. We've been waiting for 30 years for the seating capacity to increase from 16 to 19. This is a good thing, and we would like to see it happen. Basically, we all agree that changing it to 19 will be the safest and best solution. And we'll put it into implementation to see how it goes. It's not really a matter of review. We wonder whether with the new seating capacity, the queues will be shorter. I'll ask government departments to at least get an understanding about what happened in a year or two in relation to utilization. We already have established a procedure to look at the effectiveness of new measures. There's a measure to look into the effectiveness of light buses and one for taxis, and we will do it. I've just been told that there is such an exercise next year, 2018. What exercise? That is a regular exercise to look at utilization of light buses. It's an established practice. Once we have completed that survey, we will report to the LegCo. I just want it on the record. Well, whether it is 1 year or two, at least I want it on the record so that we can follow up. We will adopt the established procedure about the utilization survey. There is another consideration from a policy perspective, that is the ecosystem of the trade. You give us more information then. It's not a review per se. It will be an update. We will cover information, say for example, how many vehicles will change to 19 seats. I'm sure you will want to know, and they'll be covered in the survey. Perhaps you will wait for that before we have any further discussion. I think whether it's members or officials that they just want to meet demand. Next, Mr. Ben Chen. We are the LegCo. We are unable to amend a bill. I find it quite appalling. You introduce a bill to LegCo, but we're not allowed to change anything. Isn't that a problem? This is your long title and we can't change it. We can't change it from 19 to 20. You have phrased your long title in this way, taking the right to amend from us. So you ask us to be just rubber stamps? Is it the case that you have already decided that this is going to be the way? You gave us this title and we can't change it. The legal advisor said that we may make an application to the President, but the President will take into account the view of the legal advisor and decide in accordance with the rules of procedure. We do know that it will not happen. I don't think it is ideal. Mr. Edward Lau said that since we cannot amend it, perhaps there can be a review in a suitable time, and that can't even be done. We only ask for an additional survey. In your usual survey, you will only give us the average figures. You say, for example, the average daily passenger trips, but morning peak is different from the evening peak. Why not? Why don't you cover the period between 8 and 5? Instead, you always cover between 8 and 11 p.m., 8 a.m. and 11 p.m. We do need a review. If you think 1 year is too short, perhaps 3 or 5 years, at least tell us when there will be a review. I don't remember how long we have waited for it to change from 16 to 19. Over 20 years? 30? It seems to be too long a wait. Give us a topical review, a dedicated review, not just one that piggyback on your standing survey. If you think 1 year is too short, 5 years then. At least there is a date. Thank you. Thank you for the suggestion. Let me make it clear. I thought I in effect said that there will be a review. I said that yes, a review is necessary. It's not the case that under the policy a review is not allowed. So we will do it. 1 year is too short, and we might decide later when the review will take place. When of course we have a regular review to once every 5 years to see if the current situation can meet demand, and we can include the seating capacity in our review. Can I take it that when you review the number of light buses in your regular 5-year review, you will increase seating capacity? Yes, at least for the next review. Do you accept, Mr. Chan? Well, if you're willing to review the seating capacity, then we will accept it, because we at least will know that there will be a review. We don't want to wait for another 30 years, and because by then we will be old, we will need the low floor light buses. Mr. Jonathan Ho, well, in the annex, paragraph 3, I find it very disappointing, because when it comes to the overhead, it's understood you take it as the deposit. Well, I do think that green minibuses drivers are all employees that should be protected. They should not be asked to make an advance payment. So I would like to ask, what kind of security or deposit? We don't have to pay for deposit. Employees should not need to do that, because it's $300, and every month at most is 1/4 of your salary. If you want to charge deposit, I don't find that acceptable. I'll defer to the assistant director. Well, when it comes to the security deposit, we have asked questions about the situation for red minibuses. It's not necessarily the case that there is a clear employer-employee relationship. And when the driver is involved in an accident, maybe damage to the red minibuses or a third-party vehicle, then there may be some complaints. When it comes to green minibuses, there is a similar situation, and we have asked a lot of operators, and they said that there is no excess. But the trade union told us that there is excess required. So we asked for more specific information. But we have not received any such information. We know that that is a definition of the excess. But is it really the case for green minibuses? The Transport Department has not received any information related to that. The trade union told you, the labor union told you that all frontline drivers have to pay that, and you said no. Well, you asked the bosses, and they said no. Perhaps you should do an undercover operation to see. Frontline drivers told you yes, and then you said there is no evidence. I don't understand. I think you're talking about different things. The excess refers to red minibuses because insurance companies will ask for deductibles. Of course, drivers will have to share some responsibility, and it's different from the compensation you have in mind. But it's not related to what we are discussing today. But it's NXD is the information. I think for some drivers for red minibuses, they are covered by employees' compensation because not all of them are self-employed. I don't think you are very clear about facts. Perhaps it will be better for you to have a discussion afterwards because it's not related to the seating number, but it's related to that. Director, we have asked the labor union, and frontline drivers told us that that is the situation. But when we ask for further information, say for example which route, we won't be going to ask the specific operator. We will first carry out investigations, but we have not received any information, and the labor union has not provided further information about which route, so it will be difficult for us. So these payments, are they deducted from the driver's salary? Because when it comes to deduction from your salary, there are some restrictions. I understanding that this payment is not part of your wages. Is it under the scope of the employment ordinance? We have to look into it. Well, it's about that. Say, for example, you ask for an interview for a summer job. Say, in a model agency, you'll be asked to pay a huge deposit first.
It's just like we have to pay to do your job. Or you should pay before you take up your job. So that's not part of your salary. Well, actually, this excess payment is similar to that in the taxi industry. It's a very special practice in the industry. I understand that many drivers have stated that it should not be their responsibility to bear the insurance excess. Well, so would there be more information for us at the next meeting? Well, I have said earlier that this is not directly related to the 19 or 20 seats we're discussing today. This is some information provided by the administration in relation to the questions raised by members. We hope to complete this amendment before this term is over. Otherwise, it would affect those who are purchasing new vehicles with subsidy. No, it doesn't really affect the 19 seats or 20 seats today. So we're going to hold the next meeting. Well, I hope that there won't be another meeting. As I said, our time is very tight because this year ends around mid-July. Therefore, there won't be enough time, and I hope that we'll be able to leave 15 minutes for the clause-by-clause scrutiny because time is really, really very tight. The administration has already responded to the main questions. Well, although I understand that DAB is not very happy with this response, I hope that when you come up with an amendment next time, that you should also consider. Yes, Mr. Leung Kwok-hong, you're not a member, but we welcome your comments. Well, my assistant told me to come attend this meeting. I heard what Mr. Lau Kwok-fan said just now upstairs. The long title is the original intention of the government. Did you actually consult the members before you set out the long title? I think Mr. Chen didn't really address this answer. Well, if you don't really have to put the word 19 in the amendment, you can just say that you're going to increase the number of seats, and that will be it. You don't have to be so specific because otherwise the title would just be limiting us. And that's very disrespectful to LegCo. If a majority of LegCo members believe that the number should be 20, then you would have to go back and do it over again. The government believes that whoever is in the way are considered enemies of the government. Well, I can tell Mr. Lau Kwok-fan that I lost $800,000 once because I asked for a judicial review on the amendments. Vehicles have their own life cycle. Therefore, the vehicles will need to be changed when time is up. You don't really have to make or set legislation. So that is just not what you should be doing right now. Well, your view is that members should not be in the way for owners trying to apply for subsidy for change in vehicle. Well, you can change your policy. This is not set by the law. You can make changes to it any time because it is a policy. You can make policy changes any time. If you make your mind to do it, of course you will be able to be successful. Or you could just try to extend the subsidy date. This is something that the government can do. Well, you don't want to do it, and you tell us that the subsidy cannot be extended. So what can we say? There's nothing we can say. Well, I really doubt whether the extension date, the subsidy date cannot be extended. I think you should be able to do it. Well, you want us to approve your amendment. If there is a clause saying that you must bring it back to LegCo in 2 years, well, you said that there is no such a clause, that you shouldn't set a date for review. So what can we say? No, that's not going to be out of scope if you set a date for review. You don't want to add in the sunset clause. Well, you can't. It seems that you can't do anything. You tell us that you can't change the number from 19 to 20. You should just have made the numbers vague. Then you will be able to do it. Next door, talking about the tobacco packaging. It's something not mandatory. It is just something suggested by the EU. So but there's so many people working on it right now. I want to ask the Deputy Secretary. Is Mr. Anthony Chung still the secretary? What is he doing, or is he already on leave? Well, if you're able to persuade us, then you will need to add in this long title. You should be fair. And a member just asked whether about the subsidy. Well, now I ask you, can you extend the subsidy period? Well, time is up, Mr. Leung Kwok-hong. I don't think you're asking for an answer from the Deputy Secretary. Mr. WAN Siu-kin, thank you. Well, never mind. I'm just going to follow up on the question. So you can see that it is very rare that both the pro-establishment camp and the democratic camp are consistent in our views. Well, we're not trying to be disrespectful to you, Chairman, but it seems that we have just wasted all our work because the government is not willing to move. Well, we know that there is a subsidy for the vehicles. You can extend it at any time. You're just trying to tell us to stop moving CSAs and to just endorse it. My question is very easy. You could perhaps try to answer Mr. Leung Kwok-hong's question before you answer mine. The government, can make the change yourself, or if not, you should put in the review arrangement. I think that's fair. I mean, we know we do have to set a bottom line for what we're willing to tolerate. I agree with what Mr. Chen Han-pen said. Well, right now, verbally, you promise to review in 3 years or 5 years or 10 years. But to tell the truth, very clearly that if you don't put it down in black and white, then no review would be done until maybe 30 years later again. And we really can't wait that long. So can you first address Mr. Leung Kwok-hong's question? And secondly, can the administration change it yourself, or you try to put down or put in the mechanism arrangement on paper? Otherwise, we would still move CSAs at council. Or I'm not sure whether this is your real intention, or what are your views on that, because it doesn't seem that you're willing to take our views into consideration. Well, before the administration responds, I would like to say that I've already submitted a letter to the Environmental Bureau to request a subsidy extension, but they have already replied that they are not going to seek more funding from the Finance Committee. Oh, Mr. Leung Kwok-hong is not present. But I'd like to thank you all for your views and your questions and your concern. The government has set the number 19 is not a number out of nowhere. We have considered it very carefully, and we have collated many views, and on paper we have already reported that many members are inclined towards the number 20. We have explained many times the difference between 19 and 20. I think we all agree on one point, that the higher the capacity, the more passengers we could carry. But this is a zero-sum game. So we have to be very careful in how we deal with it. I hear that many views today ask for a review in the future. I made 2 points right now. First of all, we are going to conduct a market survey in 1 year. So that's regular, right? Yes, so this will be done in 1 year. And at any time when members believe that there is a need for change, we welcome your comments. And can you give me answers? Can you give me answers on the mechanism? Yes, I am moving on to it. So we are going to conduct a market review in 1 year, and Dr. Fernando Chung, we are running 3 hospital routes which will need to be reviewed. And we are going to have some numbers in 1 year time. So I suggest that we could present these figures to you in 1 year. I will go back to discuss with the secretary to use the indicators mentioned today, whether we're able to cater to the market demand. And second, to collate the views of the sector. We're willing to discuss if there is a need. And we can discuss it all together next year. We don't have to wait 30 years. The maximum capacity of 4,350 minibuses would need to be reviewed in 5 years' time. And of course, when we discuss that, we would also discuss the capacity itself. I think we really should deal with the concrete issue. We are dealing with it very pragmatically.
When it comes to environmental protection, I heard what the chairman said. It's not under the purview of the Transport and Housing Bureau, but if members ask for more flexibility, we will forward your view to the Environmental Bureau, and then we will give you their answer. We've heard your views, and we'll take that into account next time we prepare a bill. Don't worry, we don't do it with bad intention. Is perhaps for want of better skills. I apologize. Dr. Fernando Chung just left. Second round, Mr. Edward Lau, 4 minutes. Just now, the Deputy Secretary said that there is a regular review of 5 once every 5 years. If that is an effective review, then we wouldn't have to wait for 30 years to see some progress. I have been droning on about this. There has been a lot of other people asking for an increase in seating capacity, asking for, say, for example, 24 seats. You've been trying to ignore them, and it's only recently when the pressure has been mounting that you gave in. I am quite determined. It doesn't mean we will not do anything in the second reading or the third reading. Why don't you tell me when the review will take place? 2 years, 3 years, and there will be a review on the sitting capacity. Instead of telling me that you will gauge demand. You have heard a lot of views from the panel. I have given you a lot of comments, but I don't see them being reflected in your bill. Yes, it's important that you have heard our views, but more important is how you put it into writing. And I attach more importance to people who can't get on the minibus. So I now ask you to tell me whether you will include it in your survey or whether you will make it clear in the second reading resumption. There will be a review, as I said, whether it is incorporated in the survey next year or the review report of the 3 low-floor free routes with low-floor vehicles. And it will be part of the minutes. I hope that this will meet the demand of Mr. Lau. Next time, there will be a 5-year survey. There will be a survey on the number of vehicles, 4,350. We will have a separate survey on the seating capacity. You have given us the undertaking, but there is nothing I can do if you do not introduce a bill. Well, if you say that members this or that, we will amend it. You said it's in writing. I find that acceptable.
大家覺得有需要，跟住就去條例草案嘅修訂，跟住。
Well, there will be a review. There will be an amendment. Is that right? We will forward the report to the transport panel. Then members may forward their demand, and we will have a discussion. You know that we can't introduce bills. Yes, you can. Private members' bill. Perhaps you'll read the administration's report, and if you're not happy with it, you may introduce a private member's bill. But then it involves financial implication. But I don't see in any way that it involves financial implication. Perhaps we will follow this up. Yes, I will follow it up, of course, because it's something to do with a trade. Next, Mr. Ben Chan, 4 minutes. Just now, Mr. Leung Kwok-hung was criticizing, saying that he has lost a lawsuit. That's why the administration acts like this, and it shows that well, one should not apply for judicial review easily, because it will only make the administration bolder. And from what Mr. Edward Lau said, we see that we're not very confident that the administration will meet our demand. Perhaps you can include it in your speech in the second reading debate resumption. The DAB is very concerned. Well, I am from NT-West and Mr. Lau's from NT-East. We see that in remote villages, residents rely only on light buses. Once one is full, you have to wait for 30 minutes. The frequency of buses is not frequent. Even if you add 3 seats, they will not help. Of course, we would like the administration to add as many seats as possible. Otherwise, it will not be fair to residents living in remote villages. Well, with a long title like this, that's why there is nothing we can do. That's why we are so worked up. If you give us a serious review in 3 or 5 years, if you give us an amendment to increase the seating capacity, of course we would like to see that. It's not the case that we second guess your intention. We just want to tell you that this is a real problem. It's not the case that we do this out of nothing. It's based on our inquiries we have made and also our observation. There may be more and more people living in remote villages. They will not be able to get on the minibus, and it's something that the THB will have to deal with. So, DS, are you going to incorporate it in the Secretary's speech? I will try to do that. Let me reply to what Mr. Chan said. I know Mr. Chan does it out of good intentions. When it comes to transportation for remote villages, of course, there are areas that can be improved. But you can rest assured that our policy looks at the macro situation. So if you think that light buses cannot serve its purpose in some areas, please let us know. We will review the situation. So it's not a problem of whether it's 19 or 20. Perhaps, DS, you can drive a bus to Shoitao village. There are many different types of buses. I would like us to start the clause by clause today. Dr. Fernando Zhang, speaking for the first time, 5 minutes. There are 2 bills committee, and I have moved amendments in the other one, so I have to be there. In relation to the long title, well, when we try to amend the ordinance related to the MTRCL and the then KCR, we have encountered something similar. There is a restriction imposed on us under the rules of procedure. We don't necessarily have to be restricted by the long title. However, the rules of procedure impose the restrictions on us, and the LegCo can amend the rules of procedure. Can we introduce amendments to the long title, or or some other matters, I think it's down to the rules of procedure. It's not the law. That's why a decade ago I asked the rules of procedures committee to change it so that we will not impose this unnecessary restrictions on us. I made that request a decade ago. But of course, the ROP committee is dominated by the loyalists, and you don't accept what I proposed. So it is your own doing that our hands are tied. The restrictions are imposed on us by the ROP. Now, back to the seating capacity and also the low floor. Last time I said I would like to amend it so that some of the seats are barrier-free seats for wheelchair users. The legal advisor said he would go back and to see whether it's feasible. I wasn't here, so I don't know whether it was feasible. Yes, it was explained it could not be done, and the administration has sought the advice of the DOJ, and the answer is the same. And the DS has also explained. The type of vehicles with low floor exceeds the statutory length limit, so we need exemption for every single vehicle. It seems rather cumbersome. So do we need a legislative amendment as a whole? Secondly, I have pointed out last time that these three routes cover public hospitals. We asked for that because the rejection rate of rehab buses stands as 10,000 cases, and over half of them are follow-up consultations. Well, there is St. Teresa is on a flat site. The other one is Prince of Wales. It's also not on a slope. That means that there are already low-floor buses going there. It's franchise buses. Of course, it will be better for us to. It will be better to have light buses. Queen Mary Hospital is on a hill, but now there are lift towers. But we do need Sandy Bay and Duchess of Kent Hospital. We do need those hospitals to be covered because we're talking about physically disabled children. They do need low-floor buses. And these hospitals that I've just mentioned are on a hill slope. And there are also Queen Elizabeth, the Eastern Hospital. There is a lack of low-floor buses. And you only cover the three areas with no urgency. And then you will use these three routes to serve as the basis of your review.
Because those with the most urgent need are not these three hospitals, so I really don't understand why you are so far from reality. These members just now mentioned many villages and rural areas needing light buses to commute. Well, for the elderly who need wheelchairs, then are you saying that they would never get to go out? Deputy Secretary, thank you, Dr. Chung. The three routes are now trial runs only. But you can be rest assured that we would add in more routes. Well, you can discuss with us. I've already told the secretary the routes which have urgent need. Well, I will go discuss with him. We are running trial runs not only for passengers but also for the buses and the bus drivers. So don't worry, these three are only for trial right now. We want to seek the best method or the most ideal one. We're not trying to make excuses. These trial runs would be conducted very seriously. For subsidy, for transport subsidy, then this has nothing to do with the seating capacity, but we will continue to do so. Mr. Tian, please, 5 minutes. Please be brief. Thank you, Chairman. I'm not sure whether it is because of my railway background. I believe that public transportation should be safe and speedy. I think a safety issue in Hong Kong has been very well compared to other countries. I understand something very well. You make legislature that putting on seat belts is mandatory, but go take a look. How many of them really wear seat belts? I suggest that for new registered public buses, then they will need to install a safety belt sensor, because this relates to the safety of the drivers and passengers. I know that it is not technically feasible this time. However, I would like to remind Mr. Chan that minibuses out of all public transportation has the highest accident rate, according to the Transport Department figures. The reason being a few serious accidents many years ago, leading to the installation of seat belts. With seat belts, it shows that the responsibility lies with the passengers and not with the driver. The driver, cannot see who is wearing a seat belt. You can't just go check at every point. The seat belts are now installed, but the legislation is really a failure because nobody wears seat belts on minibuses. Go take a look yourself. I don't want to look into single responsibility or individual responsibility of passengers. But for new public buses, if you install a sensor, then everybody will remember. It's just like private cars. Those sitting in the passenger seat would need to wear seat belts, otherwise the sensor would sound, or the sensor would go off. I think you should do this, and it will gradually remind people to wear seat belts. Well, if the sensor goes off, everybody glares at you, you would remember. I don't remember, I think it was a few months ago. When was that? There was a case. A passenger was thrown out of the bus. It's very obvious that the passenger was not wearing a seatbelt at that time. So either you take out the legislation, or if you have already since we already have the legislation, we should just install a safety sensor. Some people have asked me whether the drivers would complain. I said the drivers bear no responsibility. It's a responsibility of the passengers to wear seatbelts. Even with a sensor, the driver can remind the passengers to put on their seatbelts. I support this amendment. I've spent a lot of time working towards it. or can you proactively carry out a consultation on the safety sensor? I don't know how long it will take. It might take 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. Because there are new minibuses every year. I think you should try doing this from now on. Deputy Secretary, thank you, Mr. Tian. Thank you for your support. We place huge emphasis on road safety. I'm not sure whether the seat belts are to no avail. Maybe it's just for certain routes. Perhaps I could repeat what I said at the last meeting. We see that even with legislation, people do not wear seat belts. But if you do not wear seat belts, you're actually violating the law. But that would not deter people. Since the amendment, there has been a new wave of new minibus purchases, and now 70% of the minibuses provide seat belts. Only 30% do not. When all the old buses become obsolete, then 100% of the light buses would have seat belts installed. The police can enforce the law, but we can go back and discuss with the industry to see how we can gradually make some changes to see whether a safety sensor installation is feasible, and how the drivers can use it, and we can explore the idea and then come back to the panel. Thank you. I'm sorry, Mr. Leung. Mr. Jeremy Tam, sorry, it's his first round, 5 minutes. Mr. Tam, thank you. I'd like to thank you for exploring the buses that exceed 7 meters and which roads do not cater for such vehicles. Well, here it is listed that it's prohibited for vehicles with length exceeding 7 meters. I'm sure there's still a leeway because some locations actually can cater to a longer length. At this stage, I think we can proceed with 2 other ideas, which is in future when we build new roads, you could put up a sign that prohibit vehicles exceeding 7 meters, but actually it can cater to vehicles with lengths exceeding 8 or something, so that when the new buses really can become longer, then the roads would still be able to be of use. Secondly, I see that the 11 locations in Hong Kong, 4 in Kowloon, and 25 in New Territories. Those locations, even though the sign says that it prohibits vehicles with length exceeding 7 meters, I can see that some locations can still allow longer vehicles. Maybe you can look into whether the longer minibuses can take another road to move into the locations. That's a very good idea, and we will follow up. Next time, Mr. Leung Kwok-hong, second round, 4 minutes. Mr. Chen Hanben reminded us not to go for a judicial review each time. Well, at least you should do it once to see where your rights are. According to 74, you must get a written approval from the chief executive before you can proceed. So, Dr. Fernando Chung's idea is that we should not give up our autonomy. And so if we really want to make changes to the long title in accordance with 74 on rules of procedure, then we would need the written approval of the CE. And right now, we do not have the rights to do that. I have to ask the government about the seat belts. I think it can be done. Or just like taking the airplane, or the plane would not take off if you refuse to fasten the seat belt. Or look at United Airlines. You get dragged off the aircraft. So you should not treat the bus driver as a driver. He should be a conductor. If there is a sensor, then the driver would need to say that he's not going to start the vehicle unless seatbelts are fastened. Then the pressure would be on the passenger. Or maybe you can set the installation to be that if the seatbelt is not fastened, then the vehicle will not be able to move. Or you can add an insurance clutch. Oh, sitting on number 4. You haven't worn your seatbelt. If the passenger said he has already done it, then you could, unclick the safety clutch. Well, how can it not be possible? How do the airlines do that? Well, try not fastening your seatbelt on the airplane. Go try to see if the aircraft would take off. Well, look at what happened on United Airlines. Mr. Leung Kwok-hong, yes, we would consider your proposals. I think it's not a technical issue. I'm sure the industry will respond to the market because it's not anything very technologically advanced. The conductor on the MTR train is in charge of the whole train. Anyone that is not feeling well, then you need to stop the train. If anyone crashed into the gate, then the train would stop as well. Or if somebody's sleeve is caught in the door, then the train would not start. So you can say that you have to, the driver acts as a conductor. He serves as a capacity as a conductor, not a driver. So you have to be clear of the role.
Well, sometimes I see eye to eye with what Mr. Leung said, but he is quite radical. But I would take a gradual process approach. The administration said that the trade will be consulted, and you said that if someone doesn't buckle up, then the driver would refuse to drive off. But what about some burly guy? And if there is a warning saying that someone has not worn a seat belt, then the minibus cannot start. I think it would be very difficult to recruit drivers. Well, on the 25th of October 2015, it was a New World First bus which crashed into a light bus, and the light bus toppled. Passengers are all injured and thrown off their seats. 15 passengers injured together with the driver, and it was found that passengers were thrown all around. They hit seats, windows, and no one has worn the seat belt. I think less than 10% of the passengers have worn seat belts. It was only October last year, only 6 months ago. And if it happens again, I am sure that you will remember. Don't assume that minibuses may not come with seat belts. People don't wear them. There is the law, but no one enforces it. Then it's forgotten. So can you give us a timetable? Well, perhaps you can start at the end of this year. I support increasing the seating capacity. And then operators in the coming few years will buy new vehicles. If you miss the opportunity, how are you supposed to get operators to do it? So just don't change the responsibility. Well, we do have to give notice. It cannot be done in a rushed manner. Before you came in, we have mentioned it. We will have a market utilization rate survey on light buses next year. We will give you a report. And we will also deal with the seating capacity of 19 and whether there is a need to increase it further. That also includes the utilization of the 3 bus routes mentioned by Dr. Zhang. And we will also incorporate what you have mentioned, that is seatbelt sensors. As the same report will cover all that. Perhaps the THB will talk to the police to ask them to step up the enforcement action. Dr. Fernando Zhang speaking for the second time. I really look forward to your review. I hope it won't just look at the passenger demand, because the 3 routes may not be the most representative. You have to take into consideration our aging population. So the demand for barrier-free public transport will increase. I support 20 seats because with a seating capacity of 20, then it would accommodate barrier-free seats more easily. In Germany, there is a type of vehicle that uses foldable seats. So there is a seat if it's not occupied by a wheelchair, so the operator would not suffer the loss of fare. So it's technically feasible. I find it regrettable that you can't even ask for a certain percentage of light buses to provide these seats. Well, Mr. Edward Lau wants to increase it to 20, and I want to specify about the barrier-free seats. I hope perhaps our legal advisor and the administration will give us an information paper. It has already been explained, yes, but that was a verbal explanation. I would like it to be an information paper. Yes, yes, we will forward it to the DOJ before coming back to you. If there are no other questions, I hope we will be able to start the clause by clause. Should we look at CB bracket 4 1051 stroke 1617 bracket 01, the markup copy? Chinese version? Yes. Well, this is to amend the road traffic ordinance to increase the maximum passenger seating capacity of light buses from 16 to 19, and to make consequential amendments and to remove obsolete transitional provisions added by the Road Traffic Amendment No. 3 Ordinance 1988. In relation to some other regulations and ordinances, there will also be consequential amendments. There are 11 clauses. Under Part 1, Clause 1, it sets out the short title. It may be cited as the Road Traffic Amendment Ordinance 2017, and the Clause 2 and enactments amended. The enactments specified in Parts 2 and 3 are amended as set out in these parts. And after the third reading of this bill, it will be gazetted on the Friday after that, and after gazettal it will come into effect. Part 2, Clause 3. Amendments to Road Traffic Ordinance. Clause 3, Section 2, amended interpretation. First is the definition of bus. To substitute bus means a motor vehicle constructed or adapted for the carriage of a driver and more than 19 passengers and their personal effects. We have taken reference of the current definition of light bus, and we have also added the word driver to specify that the number of passengers exclude the driver. And there is also a note to remind readers that they also need to refer to Section 113C, that is the transitional arrangements in relation to buses with a seating capacity between 17 to 19. Well, subsection 2, definition of light bus, it is to change the seating capacity from 16 to 19. Clause 4 is to repeal Section 113. It was a transitional provision added in 1988. It was a maximum seating capacity 15 and 16. Since there are no such types of vehicle registered anymore, so we propose to repeal it. Clause 5 to add Section 113C as a transitional provision, that is to set out that the maximum number is 17 to 19, and those registered as private bus or public bus may keep their retain its registration, because this is to cater for the situation when non-franchise buses service will have to be retained. We would like to keep the flexibility so that owners of these types of buses can re-register as other types of vehicles, but they still have to meet the requirements of the law. 113C, that is to retain registration as private bus or public bus. They will still continue to meet the definition of private bus or public bus. So far, any questions? No. Part 3, that is they are the other amendments to other regulations or ordinances. Division 1, amendment to Motor Vehicle First Registration Tax Ordinance. Clause 6 is to amend Section 2(1), that is the definition of bus and light bus. Clause 7 is to repeal Section 8A. Similarly, it was a transitional provision added in 1988 in relation to private bus and public bus. As we have explained that these provisions are outdated, so we propose to repeal them. Under the new amendment, the definition of bus is the same as the definition under the Road Traffic Ordinance. So the transitional provision to add 113C applies, so there is no need to put in place another transitional provision. Subsection 2, amendments to road traffic government regulations. Clause 8 is to amend Regulation 2, definition of bus and light bus, to cite the interpretation. Clause 9 is to repeal Regulation 15A, that is in relation to transitional provision regarding public and private buses. Any questions? No. Division 3. Amendments to road traffic construction and maintenance of vehicles regulations and its schedule. Clause 10 is to amend the third schedule maximum passenger seating capacity to change it from 16 to 19. Clause 11 is to amend the ninth schedule, Part 3, Paragraph 7A, the reference of number to change it from 16 to 19. So these are all the different clauses. These are just technical amendments. Legal advisor. The Legal Services Division has checked the Chinese and the English version, so there are no problems with the English version either. On the 28th of June, this will go to the Council for a second reading debate, second reading as a resumption. The notification period ends at the 9th of June. Notification for amendment ends at the 19th of June. We'll make a report to the House Committee on the 16th of June. There being no other business, meeting adjourned. Thank you very much. And there will be a lot of follow-up work to do.